a conversation with a fellow clown. It's not very serious, we're clowning around. It's really just a conversation. There. Welcome to another conversation. Did you like my new intro? It's very silly. I think we're just gonna have to watch it again because it just gives me pleasure. Here we go. Just a conversation with a fellow clown. It's not very serious, we're clowning around. You can join it's really just a conversation. Cool. I hope you like that. I had fun making it. Welcome. Today we are talking to Jon Davison, who is an old friend, an old colleague, and a wonderful clown and teacher. And I'm really looking forward to talking to him and hearing about his latest ideas about clowning, which are always evolving and always challenging the norms. So it's going to be a very cool conversation. Just before we start, please, if you're new, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do that. That would be a wonderful support to me and this work, to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And also, just a quick announcement. So you may have seen about this on the Facebook group or an email, but on the week of the 28th of March, that whole week, I'm going to be running a free series of half-hour sessions every day on the topic of create your clown masterpiece. So this is kind of giving some tips and kind of strategies for actually making work, starting points, ways to develop and deepen the work, and also ways to kind of polish and think about structuring some kind of final presentation. So all that week, every single day at 9 o'clock Pacific time, so that's noon if you're on the East Coast, and it's 5 p.m. in the UK. They're just half-hour sessions, and I'm also going to be doing some free giveaways for the people who join live. And at the end of the week on the Friday, so I've got this crazy idea, and I don't know if it's going to work, to get at least 100 clowns on a live Zoom call to do a game of Jacques. So if you're up for that on Friday, because it's the 1st of April, it's April Fool's Day. And I think we should have an annual tradition for all getting together on April Fool's Day. Even, you know, I know we're all going back to in-person stuff, but maybe April Fool's Day could be the one day when we all get back online and play silly games on Zoom. So join me for that. And yeah, and all the other kind of cool things that are going on the moment. So Jon Davison is here with me today, and he is, well, let's see. I think, you know, Jon, in a way, is kind of a role model and a hero for me because he combines academia, this very critical perspective on clowning, with practice. Right? He's a teacher, a performer, and he's also a thinker and an academic. And his books that he's written, his two books that have been published, Clown and Clown Training, both kind of tread that line between practice and theory. We'll talk a bit about those books and hopefully about what his new book projects are coming up. He, well, of all the many things he's done, some of the most important are when he co-founded the Escola Clown in Barcelona in 1996, I think, or around about then. He was also AHRC-funded Creative Fellow at the Central School of Speech and Drama, where he obtained his PhD in clown performance practice. And I was able to read that PhD and watch his final performance, which we may also talk about. He's a lecturer in several universities, founder of the London Clown School. He's run many clown shows, cabarets, and really supported the whole world and culture of clowning around the world. So welcome, everybody, and welcome to Jon, Mr. Jon Davison. Hello, greetings.
Hello, Barnaby.
Hello, Jon.
That's a lovely introduction. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. What, you mean the song or what I said about you?
Oh, no, what you said about me.
Oh. What, you didn't like the song?
Oh, I've heard it before. No, of course I like the song. Yes.
I'm not a great ukulele player, but have you ever played the ukulele?
I did have a ukulele when I was a child, actually. I was quite into the ukulele. What I liked about the ukulele was the little tuning pipe you had with it. It was a little whistle thing that had four the right notes on it, two pointing one direction, two pointing the other way. And the ukulele tuning is so weird. It's like da, 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 or something weird like that.
Yeah.
I love the little pipe more than the instrument. I'm not good with stringed instruments.
That's very cool. Of course, now we all do things electronically, so I've never come across this tuning. Sort of,
oh, have you not? You want to check that out? Get one on eBay.
Analog tuning systems.
Analog tuning. Yeah, David. Yeah, David. I can see the chat. Yeah, you remember?
Yeah. Well, welcome everybody on the chat. I should check out who's with us today. We've got David, we've got Chris, Tanya, Piero. Hello. We've got Catfish, Juan Camilo. We've got Chad from the Red Nose Factory. Hello, everybody. It's so good to see you. If you haven't written into the chat, please do say hi and let us know where you are today. And also, what you'd like to say to Jon. Here he is. You can say it. You can tell him what you think about him to his face. And you can also ask questions of a clownish nature.
Oh, thanks, Juan.
Juan Camilo says, I love Jon Davison and your papers. Your papers. Where are your papers, Jon? You have them with you?
My papers. I have a new passport, actually.
Oh, those are paper. That's another type of paper, I guess.
Post-Brexit passport.
Yeah. The kind of papers you have to present when you...
Yeah.
Where are your papers?
Yeah. Where are your papers? Yeah. I've had lots of papers recently. Lots of traveling. So
yeah, you have. In fact, why don't you? Let's start with that since you mentioned it, because you've been all over the shop recently.
A little bit, yeah. So I was in Romania just before Christmas, and then in Athens last month, and I've just come back from Potsdam in Germany. They were all amazing trips, and being with people in person. I'd gone back to teaching in person here in the UK at London Met University since October, and that was great. So I'd got used to it, and I'd done a weekend workshop in Brixton in September. So I was jumping back in, but actually traveling and then meeting other people in a different place, in their place, and seeing what happens when whatever I bring meets whatever they are and what they want and hope for.
Yeah.
That's just so amazing. And yeah, all those three were all mind-blowing experiences, really. So.
Yeah, tell us about Greece, because I'm super curious about that. You had a grant to go and do some investigation into social activism, political activism, and clowning. Is that right?
That's right. So we got a small grant for mobility, which is basically paying our travel and our costs to be somewhere, from a fund called iPortunus, which is an EU bit of funding. And it was for artists to be able to meet up in person, post lockdown. And we hadn't been able to meet up. And Robin Hambrick, Hilary Ramsden, and I met up. And we'd been meeting online for the last 2 years, pretty much, because Hilary and Robin, and also Sabine Choucair from Lebanon, who wasn't able to join us, had coincided in an online class that I was teaching just by chance. And these are three people, important people in the clown world who happen to have an interest in activism, and changing things in the world using clowning. And so I ended up teaching them, what I know online. And then we continued to meet every Friday morning online, just to keep working together. And we came up with some ideas. How do we do this online? We were trying some stuff and it wasn't really going anywhere. And then we said, oh, look, we can get some money now, we can travel. So Hilary hosted us in Athens, where she's kind of based now.
Oh, I didn't know that. So that's kind of why Athens, right? Makes
that's
sense.
Why Athens, yeah. So Hilary's between Athens and the island of Lesbos. She left her academic job. Talking about clown academics, of course, Barnaby, you left your academic job.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I had enough.
You had enough. What happened?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I was just fed up with the institution really trying to make me go in certain directions and fill out a lot of forms. And I was doing a lot of teaching, which is fine. Like, I like teaching, but I was expected to do research, and I didn't have any time to do research because I was spending my whole time teaching. So I kind of just didn't have that space to be creative, really, except in the classroom. And I just felt like I need to get back to my roots and be a performer and a director and do these things, but which I'm doing now in a weird kind of way online. So it was really about that, managing the university context. And I don't know why Hilary left. Was it something similar to that?
Similar, I think, and from the University of South Wales, and she kind of had enough, and it was harder to do. You should interview her next.
I definitely will. I'm talking to Robin in a few weeks.
Oh, right, excellent. Right, yeah. So Hilary kind of, had already been a bit between UK and Greece, and is kind of settling more there. So she hosted us, and the idea was that we would continue with our ideas. We were looking at what can clowning do now. We were interested in what clowns might be in Europe, and what they might do in public spaces, so in the street, basically, and how they might have some kind of political or some influence on social justice, so some movement towards a better world, let's say. And we chose to focus on the old European traditions of tricksters and festive clowns, so pre-theatre clowns, from carnival or from Christmas traditions, or some agricultural clowns, like jack-o'-lantern in England, or I've always been fascinated by some of the clowns in the clownish kind of figures then that get called clowns in Spain, where I spent so long, in the fiestas, in the and the kind of really, really wild stuff that happens when communities celebrate together, and the kind of clown figures that range from satanic tricksters who steal children and to innocent fools and everything in between. So we really wanted to use that tradition rather than the theatre contemporary clown, so Lecoq and after clown, and use that, and how, because it's an outdoor tradition, and it's one that you can share with people and include people. So we spent 5 days messing around with our ideas and wondering what we were doing and finding out how to clown together, because the three of us never clowned together. That was fascinating, because we just got up and started doing things, and in the middle of having these big conversations about should we even be teaching clowning now, and big clever topics, and then we just jump up and do silly things, and we found that the silly things we did, we instantly found that we had roles together. And it was fascinating working with two people who are very experienced, and we're all used to leading workshops, and to sort of facilitating others. And it could have been a disaster. It could have been three egos, but I think it wasn't. I think it was, we were I felt everyone was very open to how the other people worked. Even if we were like, oh, really? Do you really want to do that? Why are you using that word? What do you mean by that? So it was a mixture of thinking and doing, and we ended up with these roles where one person was tended to like to find the rules for things, to formalize things. We called that a formalizer. One person tended to like to, as soon as there were rules, to break them down and do something else. We called that the innovator. And then one person just tried to follow whichever was going on. Who the hell do I follow? The follower. And those were very strong. One was strong in each of us. And then we sort of tried to play each other and stuff like that. So it was fascinating self-research.
Cool.
And then we invited people in Athens who were interested in clowning or maybe hadn't been before to join us for 2 days to work, to carry on with that research. So we realized that we didn't want to just say, okay, well, we think we know this and we're going to present this to you and teach you this, because we were just asking questions and not knowing where we were going. So we continued with them, with a dozen or so people, saying, and went out on the street each day with a different proposal. The first day I actually wasn't there because I was sick, but I know they did a very individual kind of stuff. People made costumes. We had all this paper and cardboard to make costumes very quickly in an hour. So everyone made a costume, and then we went out and did the experiment, and then we had a feedback. And the second day we came up with a whole scenario to do, which was a kind of mini festival thing. We'd all go down to the square where we were going to perform, and we had different roles. Some were kind of engaged in maintaining the order of the ritual. Some were there was a leader, and then there were 2 clowns who would talk to people in Greek, and then one wouldn't talk. So we kind of tried to find, and these are all kind of roles that we'd identified in traditions in Europe. So can
and what
we
was the sorry to interrupt, John. I'm just wondering, like, this sound, I'm just trying to get the experience across of this. For what was it like to do that out in public, to parade and do this little mini festival? How was the reaction and so on?
Right. Well, personally, my own reaction to it was like, oh my goodness, I haven't done any clowning person in public for so long. Was, oh wow, that's a big impact. So we would walk through, and this was kind of quite touristy bit of Athens. I mean, which bit of Athens isn't? But we're walking past people outside in bars. It's February, but it's not that cold.
Yeah,
people outside. So you've got a group of people, clowns, right, dressed in cardboard, bits of
which are great costumes, by the way. I loved. In fact, I'll put in the chat here, if you can remind me of it. The blog.
The blog. It's called Exodus. Eggs, as in the eggs. Odus.
Maybe somebody who's watching can just kind of look it up and put the URL in the chat for everyone, because there's some great pictures. And
ODUS.
There we go. I can't multitask, so I'm not going to try and do it while I'm talking to you, but somebody will.
No, I'm not going to do that.
So, but I want people to see it because the cardboard costumes were really cool. The photos.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully someone will find that. Otherwise, I will try. So there's this kind of group of people who are kind of all working together, being very inward and doing what they're doing. And then there's this weird sort of person in a really outrageous costume with her. This was Hillary, a huge kind of head thing on, kind of waving her arms about and looking like she was some, I don't know what. I'm not going to name them, but we had some names, but they were private. But the and looking like she was in her own world somewhere, in some other world. And then you had, so I think people were watching going, oh, what are they doing? Why are they doing this like this? Who's that? And then someone would talk to them. And the idea, though this needs to be developed, the idea was that we wanted to encourage people to ask those questions and say, oh, what's this about? And if this, is this about the election coming up, or is this about climate change, or this is like you drama students or whatever, and to encourage that public response of, oh, I wonder what this is. And because I think when we watch things, unless we know what they are and we're sure, we think, oh, what is this? What does it mean? And rather than just consume it and take photos like tourists, and actually engage with questioning, that was our aim. It's hard to describe it briefly here. And I felt personally I was the silent clown. I was just kind of going around getting eye contact with people, going, I don't know, what is this? And that was so much fun. On the way back, and then we had this little thing where I got pelted with eggs. That was our scenario. Because I've always, real eggs. Yeah, I always wanted to be this. There's a figure in Tarazona, which is a town in northern Spain, where they have a figure called Cipo de Gato, and this is a figure that gets pelted with tomatoes. And it's very lots of people want to be this character every year, and there's a big lottery to choose who does it. And yeah, I mean, I would never, I wouldn't be allowed, not from the town, but
right.
I like this kind of, this kind of sacrificial clown figure.
You wanted to have that experience.
I wanted that experience. I got it a bit. Yeah, that was my personal bit of it. And then we all came back, and then by that time, all the people who were doing the kind of organized bit had got really high energy, so they were starting to, relate to people. So it was kind of, it was getting much more heightened. So yeah, you've got this kind of slightly recognizable thing, but it's not, and a lot of interaction. Some organization, some interaction. It's all out there in a public space. What is this? That was just, so it was just the beginning, really. We had 10 days.
Yeah, I have a question about that, which is that so link it back to social justice for me in terms of like, and I know that I'm sure that you've got in this conversation, you can't go into the kind of depth that what you're really thinking about that in its totality. But because for me, you could attach, as you were saying earlier, you could attach certain messages or meanings or things to what you were doing, and kind of try to explain that to people in a way. Or you could just let it be what it is, and it has some, presumably in potential, some impact in the world.
Right.
But what is it for you that links it back to social justice and what you did?
Yeah, I mean, that's the good question, because I haven't touched on that. Yeah, so I think we didn't, in the actual performance bit, we didn't get to that point, but we did work on it in the first week quite a lot, and it's just a long process. So we didn't get that far as what we wanted to, but what the plans were and will be when we meet again and do more. We talked about, for example, the reason we were focusing on, the objects we were focusing on were eggs, from different angles. So, from a clown angle, the egg gags, I mean, I have always, there's all that stuff, so it's easy. But why we ended up focusing on it were, and the thing we'd been interested in online was migration and refugees and borders and frontiers. Yeah, that's what we've been working with online, and we wanted to find a way that we could bring this to a public sphere where, being very ambitious, you could actually have a debate about this stuff. So the eggs and the actions that we were planning, which in the end were very simple, and they didn't have that resonance in what we did. But for example, we were talking about what happens if you give someone an egg, like an onlooker, and ask, invite them to paint the egg as whoever they want to paint it as. It might be a family member that's very dear to them, or the opposite. It might be a friend. It might be a politician they hate or love, or their favorite pop star, or whoever, so you personalize this egg, which of course, personalizing eggs and painting eggs there's lots of stuff going on, and the clown egg registry.
It was just making me think about that the clown makeup faces on eggs.
Yeah, so you identify the egg, and then you get to hold it, or you pass it around, and as in kind of puppetry and object theatre, that you imbue it with some spirit or some presence or some empathy. You have a relationship to it, or antipathy. But let's say it's empathy. So you've got this egg, and then and then maybe it gets put in a little leg box somewhere, and then maybe accidentally, or by some clown who likes to do things which are not expected. I don't know who that would be. It gets crushed, and suddenly it's gone. So you have, and then we were doing whole trays of eggs, it floating in water. Of people, so it starts to become this symbolic game that you actually have some feelings about,
Yeah.
And the people are involved in, but it's also fun and it's also clownish in that, you know, it doesn't matter. It's just, so that was where we wanted to go. You know, even having, what's the difference between a white egg and a brown egg? You know, why are they different? You know, so we would actually be able to clown with, you know, with stuff about racism and, you know, which is obviously pertinent with migration and refugees in Europe, which is what we're focusing on.
And it's just a way to it's a way, it seems to me, to kind of be able to get into topics that are really edgy and difficult in a kind of simple, fun, slightly irreverent way.
Exactly. Because exactly. So to try to touch on some of those.
Exactly.
Anyway, to be continued.
You did it. So I think, folks, if while you're listening, can you just list your egg jokes in the comments, all the egg jokes that you can think of, because there are tons of them. I mean, John, you must have dragged over the coals.
We dragged ourselves through that for a while, yeah.
Through the dirt, through the excrement.
I'm not going to play this game.
Come on. David says, clowning like what you are describing as an altruistic endeavor is fantastic. IMHO. Great. Hey, if anyone has any questions also for John, I'm hogging the limelight with questions here, which is fine because I have questions. You know, I have a lot of questions. But if anybody has any questions for John, this is your chance. So chuck them into the comments, and John will respond. So that was Greece in a nutshell, or in an eggshell, I suppose I should say.
Want to be yourself. Words.
I know. I'm not going to be able to get away from it now. It's just going to be there. So you went to Potsdam as well.
Yeah.
Was that just teaching a workshop?
That was just teaching a workshop. Yeah.
Just teaching a workshop. Sorry.
Just run of the mill. I was also asked very kindly by Angela Hopkins, who has the space, who invited me there, has this great space in Potsdam, which is an old coach house, I think.
Nice.
I think if I've remembered that right, converted into a clown research space. Werkstatt für Clownforschung, I think.
Wow, that's very cool.
I think that's the name. And yeah, so she said, Angela had done one of my online courses, the Clown Studies course, which is theory, history, and analysis. It's not a practical course. And she said, "Oh, I enjoyed that so much. Could you give a lecture?" And so I gave a talk, and we had questions and discussions.
Was that the talk? Was that the talk? Why do we need clowns now, or something similar to that?
I think so. It was clowns, history and clowns for the future, or something like that. So we were, you know, I talked about how, for me, looking at history of clowns and clowning helped me look at my own assumptions and my own stuff and what I think is, or what I've been taught, or what I tell myself is true, and look at it historically with some detachment and say, well, okay, that's come from somewhere. It's not an absolute universal truth. I mean, that's my approach. I don't tend to approach things as being universal. So I start from that point. So
can you give us an example of what is something recently that you've been questioning that?
Well, actually, in that lecture, I didn't know I was going to end up there, but my suggestion was that maybe clowns are the enemy. So we ended up at that point. Yeah. So how did it end up there? I was talking about historical example of a Russian clown of Ukrainian ancestry, actually, Vitaly Lazarenko, who was a clown. Tsarist Russia, and during the revolution and afterwards. Anyway, so there was this, I don't want to do a history lesson here, but the point was that he was in a show which was where he played the villain, the individualist, the villain who was the individualist. This was under Stalin. So, you know, the arch villain understanding is the one who is the clown. So the clown is the perfect person to play the baddie.
Right.
So and clowns might be, and earlier in his career, he was used by he was cast by avant-garde poets, and earlier in his career he played the silly Auguste in the circus. So it's the same man, probably with the same clowning. They're very different costumes, being used for different purposes. And the final one was clearly propaganda. So clowns, I'm interested in how clowns can be used, appropriated for different purposes. So that tells me that I can use clowning for my purposes. What is important is not what I think a clown is, but what my purpose is. So we could use them, for example, in the thing in Athens, we used clowning, what we think we know about clowning, for this purpose. We wanted to look at this stuff. So for me now, the big issue is, presumably for everyone, but let's say, is climate change. So the way, in terms of clowning, what do clowns do in the face of climate change? Well, climate change is pretty clownish itself. In fact, it's pretty tricksterish, and but perhaps reminiscent of all those trickster stories, particularly in North America, where you maybe know more, being there yourself. Trickster figures who do really silly things, not out of malice, perhaps just out of ego or stupidity or innocence, and end up having terrible consequences, like whole mountains being split in two, and oceans being created, basically the creation of the world, and civilizations being destroyed and made. So these terrible things. So this idea that trickster energy could wreak havoc. So what if climate change is a trickster? What's our response? So that's because then it is a teacher of mine who mentors me still, Frankie Anderson, I think, suggested that the point about the trickster is it demands a response, and if you don't respond, it will just keep playing tricks on you and messing things up. So how do we respond? So in a way, not really the enemy, but can we use, the clown is like, okay, maybe we need some civilizing, ordering forces right now, rather than chaotic, anarchic forces on our side, because there's a lot of, also because, major politicians with real power have harnessed clown energy, let's say, for malign purposes. So in order to remain in power, Trump, Johnson, etc., have used the appeal of saying, oh yeah, I'm so, I'm just kidding,
and of being outrageous as well, right? Being completely, ignoring the rules.
No, I didn't say that. And it's like, what? And it's a very slippery energy, and so maybe we need to respond to those things. I feel so. So that's
interesting, and
that's where it leads me with clown thinking.
And Zielenski, I did a video a few days ago about just looking at his comic role in Servants of the People, which is the Netflix show, or the show that's available on Netflix, that he was in a few years ago. And where he plays this teacher who becomes the president, and if you look at his performance in that role, and just the role itself, he's totally a clown. He's absolutely 100% like low status, bumbling kind of idiot, kind of always on the wrong end of things, always kind of reacting all the time. And then he becomes president. So it's a story which kind of extrapolated something about the relationship of power to clowning. And then it's kind of gone the other way around now, where he's actually president. I mean, so it was art imitating life, and then life imitating art in these weird echo chamber sort of reverberations. It's very strange. And if you watch his speeches, like when Zelensky, and he talked to Congress, he gave a speech to Congress in the States a few days ago, and there's a minute or so where he talks in English, and his English isn't very good. But the fact that he did it, and he's kind of stumbling a bit over his words and really reducing himself, and speaking in a very matter of fact, very simple way, but with great focus and kind of eye contact with the camera, and really connecting deeply with the words that he's saying and the people he's speaking to. I argued in this video that he's really harnessing a kind of clown energy, you know, and it's very different, obviously, from the clown energy that Boris Johnson and Trump are harnessing, but it's still,
he's using it for a different purpose. He's very clear about his purpose, of course, obviously. There's no question about that. It's completely channeled into, you know, and whatever things he knows and has abilities to use, he's using it for that. Exactly. That's a good example. Yeah.
So I suppose the question is, what do we want to use it for now? And your one of your answers to that question is obviously to look at issues such as social justice. And you mentioned to me just before we went on air that this idea of, you know, should we be teaching? Do we need clown teachers? And
doing
this idea of decolonizing clowning. So I wonder if you could speak a bit more about that. Like, I was quite intrigued when you said that.
Okay. You know, I like to throw these things out that people, what is it?
Yeah,
clownish. Just to acknowledge a couple of the comments there that relate to what we've been saying before that. Chris was asking about how that clown studies course has changed. I would say in that way, I was saying, you know, to respond to how did we, what use is it? I think it was there when you did it as well, Chris, but you know, it's developed out of these questions. That course has developed out of all that questioning in the last 2 years. The last one that's just finished, and they're all different depending on who's there, was very much about those individuals applying the kind of history, the analysis, all that stuff at a distance to their own work and their own concerns and what they wanted individually. So I think it's that's important to me. And that was great, you know. So we might be looking at some dead old clowns, you know, men, you know, like exactly. What am I going to do with this, you know? And the participants really did bring that always to their own, like, my concern is this, and that would be relevant. So that's how it's developing, I think. But that was them. Of course, I present the materials and people relate it to whatever they want to. And David saying about the heavy issues. Yeah, it's what you were saying, Barnaby. I think you know, that we can playfully deal with these things which are otherwise a little bit taboo. You know, I don't want to talk about that, you know, either because we're going to disagree, you know, for example, or, you know, or because someone's going to get offended, or it involves something really, you know, it involves life and death, and let's stay away from that. So so I just wanted to mention that the decolonizing is also around that area. So a couple of years ago, when I was starting the clown studies course, it was just before COVID, and I attempted it on YouTube, and it was a technological mess. And then I found Zoom. Thank you, Zoom, and everything was easy. We're not on Zoom today, so and then in April 2020 onwards into that summer, a lot of people who were joining that course, and there's quite a lot of people that time doing it. Everybody was stuck at home, of course. A lot of the debate, a lot of the interest was about the application in the real world, i.e. politics, you know, and it was the time of Black Lives Matter. And our discussions revolved around issues of culture, of racism, of equity, diversity, and so on, inevitably. So for me, that really, what's the word? Advanced very quickly my own thinking, being in a room with those people, you know, once a week for a couple of hours for several months on end. In that, so there was a lot of questioning about, who is this person? So one question I realized I'm really interested in is who is the person doing it?
Teaching, you mean?
No, doing the performing, for example. Also the teaching. Yeah, also the teaching. Who is it? And how is it that they've got to have that role? And what privilege do they have, and so on and so on. Yeah. So who is it? Very much so, and what it means for that person rather than that other person to do it, depending on who they are and how they identify, or how they are identified by the society we live in. Whether is it by age, is it by gender, is it by race, is it by ability, and so on and so on. So all those things are.
So you were looking at like well-known clowns, examples of well-known clowns, and just kind of critiquing or asking critical questions about how did they get to that place where they are sort of put on a pedestal.
Well, that was one question. It's like, why is this person doing it? Why are we looking at them?
Yeah.
Why aren't we looking at someone else? Or do we have evidence? Do we have historical, stuff to look at? For example, I don't know, you look at a clown in Europe in 1855, image, it's probably going to be a man. Does that mean there weren't any women doing it? No, because you can look at, newspaper reports that haven't been edited or collected or anything, but they're multiple women performers appearing as clowns all over the place. But they're not. There's pretty much erased from history. For example, so that kind of stuff. So the decolonizing is about addressing that, acknowledging it and addressing it, but particularly in teaching, because that's where I'm most engaged at the moment. And so at the moment, I'm collaborating with Amrita Dhaliwal from Los Angeles, from the Idiot Workshop in Los Angeles, who'd done the clown studies course 2 or 3 times now, I think. And we started to think about how we could do something. So we're applying for some big funding so that we can run some research and some workshops around different places in the world to look at what happens when you put aside, at the moment, is what happens when you put aside a focus on vulnerability. So our obsession at the moment is on this idea that vulnerability is a path towards clowning, and what happens when you don't go there, and what comes in its place. Also, what happens when you put aside neutrality and what comes in its place.
Interesting.
So this is like, what if we were to teach without trying to aim for these particular things that a lot of us have been aiming for a long time, because our suspicion is that those, for example, vulnerability. If you, what for me as a white man, it's fine to be vulnerable in a workshop, and when I walk out the workshop, I can be strong again, because I'm not actually vulnerable in reality, but someone else with different identity is actually vulnerable. We did this kind of for fun, but it wasn't very funny. Google search of vulnerability and different identities, like vulnerability and men, vulnerability and women, vulnerability and trans people, vulnerability and Black people, vulnerability and disabled people. And what Google gives you back is like real vulnerability of particular kinds. So, and historically, the whole teaching of clown through vulnerability is linked to that whole period in the 60s of therapy through vulnerability, Gestalt therapy, or group therapy, and it's all about, expose yourself and you'll be stronger. But that doesn't work for everybody. It works for certain kinds of people. So anyway, these are all questions at the moment, and what happens
perhaps
when
it's
you don't try to impose that, through particularly the boss clown or the via negativa, whether it's done in jest or whether it's done whatever it's done. So when you don't try to put people in the shit, basically.
Yeah, interesting. So how does that well, I've got some sort of reflections on that in relation to vulnerability and power, because seems to me that vulnerability is potentially a kind of antidote to the kinds of power that aren't, that we don't want, that are oppressive. So it's not necessarily about being vulnerable in order to get power, but potentially being vulnerable in order to reveal something truthful that puts us in a place of danger or risk, real risk.
Exactly.
Right. So what does it actually mean for a white man to be vulnerable? I think is a more interesting question than assuming it's easy for anybody, for people in power to be vulnerable.
No, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's possible. Whereas I don't feel I want to ask, a young black woman, you've got to be vulnerable. You've got to put yourself at risk. Otherwise you can't clown. I mean, to me, that's bullshit. And, I want to say to that person or someone else, well, show me how you clown, show me your, where do you clown from? Maybe you clown from anger, not vulnerability. Maybe you clown from celebration. Maybe you clown from, I don't know, something else.
But why can't like a young black woman being angry, seems to me, is potentially being vulnerable also. Like, I mean, why are those things mutually exclusive? Doing things that are not expected of you socially, whatever that is, could make you vulnerable, could put you in a vulnerable place, right? Because you're standing out from the crowd.
I mean, for me, just to say here, because this becomes really problematic, I think, this discussion. For me, the whole project is about reflecting on what I do, because I can't do anything else. I can reflect on what I do. I can't talk for someone else, but for me, I don't want to, use my teacher power to try to get somebody in that place that isn't the right place for them. So and it's because of what,
how does this relate back to your earlier teaching? Like the step laugh exercise, I suppose, is something that was very much associated with you and your teaching. And I know that you've moved on in many ways in your teaching and your approach. Is that exercise, like, it would be possible to associate that exercise with that kind of teaching that you're talking about, wouldn't it? Kind of putting people in the shit.
Yeah, it would be. I use it a bit less than I used to. But I think the way I use it now, would tend to use it now, is more, okay, so when you appear in front of us watching, can you appear with confidence, with other things I mentioned? Are you angry at being asked to appear on a stage? You don't actually want to appear on a stage at all. Can you, and the key thing for me is choice. So can you choose to behave in a way which might be clownish, and we could say, oh yeah, there's some clowning, because you want to, and because it feels great for you to do it, not because some guy sat in a chair banging a drum has said shit, and I don't
know who you're talking about, John.
I don't know. I don't know. I just made that up. I don't do that, but I've never done that. But I think, but it's the same. You can do it cruelly or you can do it nicely. But I don't want to, put someone in that powerlessness so that some clown might appear. For example, in Potsdam, I remember a discussion and some debate with one particular student who sometimes had this tendency to be unsure, confused physically in their brain and everything, and then suddenly had this very confident, physically competent, in control of their body kind of stuff going on. And for me, and I said to them that, why not use the confidence?
Yeah.
But the confusing, isn't that with the clown? And but no, if you choose this amazing presence and confidence, you can. Let's choose clowning. Yeah, there's a slogan. Let's choose clowning. Choose silliness. Choose. And I know that's always been there in lots of people, and we've all worked with that. But just to move more towards that.
Yeah, I mean, Jan Henderson was talking last week about a thing she does called the Extreme Joey and Extreme Auguste. And the Joey, the Joey and Auguste thing comes from Richard Pachinko, and Sue Morrison teaches the same thing.
Yeah.
And the Joey is, and Jan's description of the Extreme Joey was that it was like complete self-possession, complete confidence, complete like, I am the shit. Watch me, I'm amazing.
Totally.
And it's beautiful. That's beautiful, clown,
Yeah. So it does, this is nothing new. No, it's just there's certainly in Europe, it's still a tendency to yes.
It's so interesting though, right? Because I just want to link that back to this conversation to what you were saying earlier about people like Trump or Johnson using clowning, and there's something about one of the powers anyway of clown that people use and take and use in potentially kind of insidious ways is that it kind of is a way to pretend that what you're doing isn't important or is trivial or is insignificant, right? Because clowning has always moved in that territory of like, it's just a clown, it's not serious. I mean, I suppose this is true of comedy in general, but perhaps it's really in a focused way with clowns, that sometimes we play low status in order to kind of get in under the door or sneak into situations that we shouldn't be in and be able to have an impact without, and then be able to disclaim it. Like, it's just clown.
Yeah. And it's a classic Buffon thing, isn't it? It's like, oh, no, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to offend you. Did I? Yeah. So it's that. Yes, absolutely.
So there's something in a way also potentially disingenuous about vulnerability, where you can be, you can kind of pretend to be vulnerable, but it's actually bullshit,
Yeah, absolutely. And as the man with the drum would agree, that we mentioned this fictitious person we mentioned before, the drum would say, can you sell your shit?
Oh, so that brings me back to another thing you mentioned earlier, John, which maybe before we came on air, and I can't remember, about the thing of making a living.
Oh yes,
from clowning, and that you had a discussion about that in Athens with people about what it means to be making a living.
Is it okay if I there's a couple of comments there on what we were talking
Oh yeah,
about.
I'm sorry, I make
before. No, it's okay.
Which one do you want to talk
while
about?
you were talking? Yeah,
this one.
The how to balance. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure I want to reach people on both sides of an argument. I don't know if that's something that drives me. What would drive me is for people to be able to debate and consider different possibilities, and that we might be wrong, or that this might be personal, that might actually touch them when they think, oh, I'm not, Syrians, I'm European, that kind of thing. Or Ukrainians, I'm European. So that's to actually deal with those things and have from a place of where it engages people's empathy, not just ideas. I'm not really interested in political arguments. Arguments, no. But debates where you discuss like, is this important? Is this important? Should I care about this? Creating new ways of seeing things. So that's what I mean by the politics of And
I suppose it's hard to talk about something like social justice and to avoid getting into the arguments or the argumentative stance.
But it's a bit like the classic kind of you say to someone that might hold a position of power, but don't you care about, don't you imagine this could be your child or your mother, and if they're able to imagine that, they go, oh yeah, actually you're right, I'm not going to vote Conservative or Trump. I'm going to vote for all of us. Vote or whatever. I'm going to be on the side of all of us, not just because I think I might get lucky and get rich and aspire to some kind of power myself, but actually, we're better together. So it's that kind of thing for me, the politics.
So, okay. Yeah. Are there any other questions here? Oh, David says.
David asking about vulnerable difference of clown persona and the artist. I'm not sure what you mean by that, David. Artist.
I think he's talking about this question that I think comes up in your work, Jon, actually, about with the chair thing that you did in your practice research, that vulnerability, that moment of failing to get the laugh, is something that a chair can recreate, which implies that it's not really about the persona, because a chair doesn't have a persona. The chair, it's
the fact, it's the material fact. So what I did, I used a chair and some shoes and a plant to be clown students and do the step laugh exercise, which is people laugh, you move a step forward, they don't laugh, you move a step back. So for me, a chair can do it, manipulated by me, of course, means that it's just a fact. It's like puppets, it's like, it's a fact. This puppet moved their arm up, and we invest, or this egg, I was talking about eggs before, we imbue them with personality and empathy and so on, but it's an object. So these are just facts. And it didn't get a laugh, and this provokes a response in the audience or whatever it is, but it's not personal. And I don't interpret it as vulnerability. For me, the step laugh exercise, when you get to do it in a way that's very free, it's not vulnerable. It's just like, oh yeah, I quite like going backwards when you don't laugh. And you overcome that attachment to it's post-vulnerable, let's say. You might be vulnerable going through it, and you might have a shitty time, and I think all that stuff and the flop and all that stuff, it's really useful to sort of get through and feel. But once you've gone through that a bit, I don't see how that would. It's a training thing, but then when you build on that, you're going towards choice and confidence, and I want to do this, and it's something else, because you watch there's
something about that exercise that I've reflected on over the years, that using the chair, that has really fascinated me. And I kind of one thought I had was that a chair is a great clown because they can't be anything other than what they are, what it is. It's just like so clear in its own nature. And maybe that's something in clown training, at least for me in my clown training, that I'm trying to help people with, is to get simpler and simpler and clearer about something about their true nature as a human being. And the moment they can really accept this is just who I am and what I am, in the same way that a chair can't help but accept who it is and what it is, then it's funny, like we're released to laugh.
Except we're not like chairs, though, because we are, as Sartre would say, we're not beings in them. Is this right? Beings in themselves. We're beings for ourselves. So we have consciousness, and the true nature of a person is not something I can grasp. For me, the clowning moment of that laugh didn't laugh is a dynamic relationship between people, and that's fascinating for me, and beautiful thing, and that's what's exciting. because and I don't need to, think that I've seen someone's nature, because it's a moment. There's a moments we share, or go, what happened there, or
you're taking us into some very existential territory.
I know, let's not go there.
I did it. You didn't even notice. Existential.
Oh God, yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. I didn't notice.
When you have to point out the punchline of a joke, it just makes
that's a great exercise. That's
so
one. It's in my new book.
Oh, what? Pointing out explaining it?
Yeah,
explaining the joke.
That was supposed to be funny, and you do something that's planned to be funny. It has to be with a clear intention to be funny.
Yeah.
And then if people laugh, okay. If they don't, you explain why it was supposed to be funny by saying that was supposed to be funny because, and then you keep explaining it until it's funny, and then you move on. Because explaining comedy is ridiculous.
Oh, we've just done a very cool segue there, John. Tell us about the new book.
Oh, okay, Chris. So it's called The Clowning Workbook, and it's an example. Oh dear, David. Example. It's called The Clowning Workbook, and it's another book of clown exercises to be used by students and teachers, like the clown training book was. I was asked to do it in a series of books which have all called workbooks, focusing on different aspects of performance and theatre, and what they all have in common is they have bits of video as well, which show the exercises.
Oh, very cool.
It's doubtful whether this is going to have much of that because of the problems of filming stuff in lockdown and so on, but hopefully it will have something. And it's basically, what I, clown training, what was that, 2015? And that was me trying to write down what I'd been teaching in the previous years, particularly those big, long 1-month residential courses in Spain. That I'd been doing then. And the clowning workbook is like what I've been teaching the last few years. So if you've done clown workshops with me in the last few years, it's probably that stuff. So Chris, it's what I was doing in Calgary with you.
Would you say there's one big shift, or is there some obvious, easily explainable shift that you've made in the last sort of 4 or 5 years in terms of your teaching, away from something towards something?
I think there's 2 things. I was thinking about this beforehand, so I wouldn't get caught out by this question. And there's 2 things. One was to make it more mechanical, but that's been a shift, a tendency in me always to simplify it down to the exercises. The clown exercises and the instructions, to simplify it down to things that people can do. So I can say walk, step laugh is an example, and all the stuff in the clowning workbook kind of come from that approach. So it's something you can do. It's simple. You don't need to imagine anything, because I'm really bad at that. Any teacher asked me, imagine you're in a forest. I can't do it. I could pretend that I'm imagining I'm in the forest, but it won't be convincing.
Right.
Move with the element of water. Can't do it. So open the window. I can do that. No. Sit down
imaginatively, or really open a window.
Actually open a window. Open an imaginary window. Can't really do that either, because it's too much imagination. So basically, I'm my own teacher. That's not a question, but so, which is why I realized also in these recent years that all my teaching had been basically asking, how do we do this? I'm not sure I know how to do this. Let's try it like this. What if all you people there do this and that? I think that might be it. So it's just basically me trying to work it out, and hopefully helping people as well at the same time. So to simplify it down to the mechanical, and I like to refer to it almost as conditioning, so as in Pavlov's conditioning. You hear the laugh, you salivate.
Yeah.
No, I haven't got that far, but we're working on that.
You repeat, or you acknowledge, or something.
Repeat or acknowledge, or you have a plan. But importantly, you have a plan when you don't hear the laugh. Because I still believe that clowning is essentially about laughter, and the reaction of laughter. But you can have laughter, or you can not have laughter. So what happens when you don't have the laughter? Do you just kind of go home and cry and give up? No, you have to have something to do, somewhere to put that that shit. So I was talking about shit earlier, but it's not. It kind of comes from the man with the drum, who I learned with, and I respect this idea that no, don't like it. We don't like it. What's your response? You know?
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's what it's all about, really.
That's what it's all about. In that teaching method, it was teacher saying, next, you know, which is fine philosophically, but as a methodology with actual real people is another question. Right. But so this is like the mechanics of this response. What do you do? What options do you have? And how, when it becomes just as much fun when people don't respond how you wanted them to respond, because humans spend our lives wanting others to respond how we want them to respond. Yeah. And then be disappointed when they don't, or angry. No, so it's like, well, can we play with this? So, okay, oh, you didn't like me. Oh, okay, great, or whatever it is you choose.
Yeah,
it frees up this kind of attachment to trying others, trying to restrict the freedom of others.
Yeah.
But we're in relationship. We're in a dynamic relationship where I respond to you, you respond back, and it's not really mechanical. And what happens then, and that's the other thing that I realized a bit later on with this approach, was that it's essentially about how we feel, all of us, the performers, the clowns, the onlookers, the audience, everybody. That thanks for exemplary. And because what happens because we do have feelings about this stuff, we are attached to, and this is very Buddhist, if you like, we are attached to others' responses. And if I want to get to the other side of the room, no, please let me, what does it matter really? But we do have these reactions, and I'm really excited about working and playing with those almost self-testing. We had this joke, or maybe it was just me, in Potsdam last weekend, because in English people were talking to me about self-testing, the COVID test. What here in the UK we call a lateral flow test, the one you can do on yourself.
Yeah.
So the self-testing, and that's exactly what it is. So I go out in front of people and I do something in order to test what I feel, because it's the only thing I can know. So all this mechanical stuff is actually just a kind of meditation on where I'm at, or anybody is doing. So so basically I realized that those were the things. That's what's important to me, and my way to get there was this kind of mechanical way. Because if I go through the imagination, I just make stuff up. It's not true, and it's not.
I mean, I've always loved your games. Not necessarily all your games, but the games that you describe in clown training, and found many of them to be really helpful. And the thing that often they're helpful for is that games spawn other games, right? They kind of like they create games within themselves, other games that occur spontaneously within those structures. So you have something that's very structured with very clear rules, and it's very mechanical, but then these kind of organic new little things just sprout up all over the place within those games. And then that is what gives you the clue, I think, as to, oh, this is the kind of clown that you are. This is what really, this is where the beauty and the essence of your clowning is. It's in that game that you've discovered inside this other mechanical game.
For example, without identifying everyone, obviously, but the workshop of the weekend, there was an instance where in a group of 3 who were performing for us and responding to if we laughed or not, the particular exercise, it doesn't matter what they were doing. And one person was being funny every time they did something with very little effort. and it was just happening like that. And another one of the three was trying to sort of, maybe was trying to match that. But then when I asked them how they felt about doing the exercise, that last person said, well, I trusted that other one, because every time they did something, it was funny. So I didn't have to bother. But it didn't really look like, so we worked on how could this other one be lazier? Well, if the other one's keeping everyone happy, then let's be lazy, you know. So it became this, once they got that, then they were also very, very funny and entertaining and charming. So it was about the relationship and honesty as well. And it's not easy to get to sometimes, because we're all doing the, you know, got our habits. But then you find this, what you're calling the game, this game where one is, it's easy for me, and the other one is, it's easy for him. And actually, they're both really lazy in the end. And that was fun, because I like laziness planning.
Well, I
you
think
mentioned
that...
Sorry, go.
No, I was just gonna start wrapping up, John, because I've realized that we're like we've been going on, and we could keep talking for a long time, and I really love that. But we should probably release people from the tyranny of the screen, from the YouTube. But you know, thank you so much for sharing this with us. It's really, really cool every time I talk to you, you know, to hear sort of the latest evolution in the Jon Davison journey. And I just love how your workshop, as you described it, your workshops are always kind of explorations and lab type situations for you.
I think so.
I think that's really great. Hey, Holly was watching. You've been very quiet, Holly. Stop it. All right.
It's man.
Thank you, John.
Thanks,
I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll see you again in a little bit.
Yeah.
Bye. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in again for an extra long edition of Clownversations. And just to remind you, if you're not subscribed already to my YouTube channel, it's easy. It's right there. The subscribe button is right there. There's all kinds of cool stuff that I've been putting up lately on the YouTube channel. I'm experimenting. I'm doing weird, crazy stuff. So have a look at my clown reaction videos. I did one about Zielenski the other day, and there's interesting stuff happening there. So thank you for checking it out in advance. And don't forget to come and join in on the Create Your Clown Masterpiece free series starting 28th of March for that whole week. And of course, the April Fool's let's get 100 clowns on Zoom at once on April Fool's Day. How about it? Is everyone up for the challenge? I hope so. Extra. Read all about it. And thanks for all your eggs jokes. They were excellent. All right. Goodbye, everybody.